You're listening to Music Student 101. Today's topic, the piano. Normally, this is where I would introduce your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips. But first, please enjoy the fancy fingerwork of today's guest, Matthew Dutot Slocum.
Welcome back, everybody. Today is a special day for many reasons.
Indeed. Let's name some of those reasons.
The most important reason is our first ever guest, Matt Slocum. And
Yay!
Matt and I go way back. Do you happen to recall my band Tunnel Vision back in the day?
Of course I remember
Do you
Tunnel
remember
Vision.
The Cellar?
Of course I remember The Cellar.
There was this fine band called Gypsy Sun that when I first started playing music, Gypsy Sun was the band, kind of our brother band, Tunnel Vision. We would always share these gigs together. And Matt Slocum was the keyboardist from Gypsy Sun. I knew the first time I saw him play that he was a solid musician. The kind of guy that you feel a little more confident playing with next to on stage because you know he's got it together so much.
It's a great feeling to
You
play
know what
with
I'm saying?
people
And I've
like
actually
that.
shared the stage and played many times. He's joined us in our live shows. He's recorded with us in the studios, and it's just been great to watch him do so well, even from such humble beginnings. So, Matthew Dutot Slocum, welcome to the show, and tell us what you're up to these days.
All right. Well, recently I've been playing with Rich Robinson from the Black Crowes, and he just put a new band together. It's an amazing band, 10-piece band with some members from the Black Crowes and also members from his solo group, which I've been playing with him for about 3 years. And I actually just got back Monday. We had 4 sold-out shows at the Gramercy Theater in New York, and it was amazing, incredible shows, huge turnout. Obviously, they were sold out, and the band sounded great, and pretty much been doing that. And then I have this band King Baby that I put together, and we're putting a record out this year. And I typically play with a bunch of different people, So I'm going to be touring with Jimmy Herring this year, and we're going to be doing a 6-week tour with John McLaughlin.
Jeez.
So I'm getting ready for that. We're starting rehearsals, and that's going to be huge. So that's kind of where I am right now, like today.
Let's talk about King Baby for a second, because what you guys heard, the intro music, was actually Matt's your own composition, correct?
Yep, it is. And I wrote that tune. Actually, brought it to the band. We got together and wrote tunes together. And a couple of us brought in tunes that we already had that we've never done anything with, and added it to the band. So that was one of them. Yeah.
You guys have a pretty cool story about your first gig too, right?
Actually, we do. I've been playing with these guys off and on. Everybody kind of does the same thing, playing with lots of different bands, and so we're all busy. But we typically would get together a few times a year down at Elliott Street Pub in Atlanta and play. And the name King Baby came out of some of those guys. They came up with that. And so we did that, but it was never really anything real or set. It was just kind of come jam on nights off and things like that. And anyway, this guy who manages the Aquarium Rescue Unit and Jimmy Herring and works with John McLaughlin. And, so I knew him through that connection. And he called me up and said, hey, I've got this offer to book for a festival in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and they want like an American roots, blues, funky kind of thing. Do you have a band that you could put together to go over there and headline this festival, And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Let me call you right back. So I called up Rick, Kevin, and Mark, and they were kind of hesitant because we're talking about going to Bangladesh, like out of nowhere, and this was a month before we left. So it was like, you want to go to Bangladesh in a month?
I have a really big question to ask.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, are you sitting down?
Are you
No,
serious?
but,
Good news is we have a gig.
right. Bad news is we have to go halfway around the world to get there.
Logistics are a little tricky.
Logistics are a little tricky.
So everybody was excited, although hesitant. We all were, and we went over there and did it, and it was amazing. It was our first real gig.
So the song that you just played for us is called Dhaka Strut. Correct?
Dhaka Strut. Dhaka being the capital of Bangladesh, and that's where we were, in Dhaka. And, we met some cool people there. We've made friends over there. And we wanted to have some sort of tie to that because it was like the beginning the beginning. And it was a really cool experience for all of us. And we thought, well, let's name something in honor of that. And we just came up with Dhaka Struts.
That is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Let me just prattle off a few other names, if I may, sir.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a picture of you on Facebook sharing the stage with Victor Wooten.
Yeah.
Which is a huge deal for us,
Matt
right?
and I have
bass
mentioned
players.
many times that we're bass players, and that is like one of our. I'm doing the bowing sign right now. I'm bowing now. And Steve Bailey, for that matter, another
Bailey,
amazing
absolutely.
bassist.
Wow.
So you've gone on tour with these guys, and you actually shared the stage with them.
Yeah, I shared the stage with him. It was a tour, so yeah, I could say that. But I wasn't in Victor's band. It was Victor's band that he had with like several bass players and 2 drummers. It was sort of a project that he had put together and was doing it. You guys may be familiar with that. And I was playing with Jimmy Herring at the time. We were touring his latest solo record, Subject to Change Without Notice, and they put us together in the whole tour. And we, went out and toured with Victor Wooten, and there was several times during that tour, I don't remember how, 2-3 weeks or whatever it was, I don't remember, that he would come and sit in with us. One chance I got to go sit in with them, so it was kind of like different people sat in, and we all got to play together, and it was amazing.
I'm not going to belabor our listening audience with all the questions I want to ask you about playing with Victor Wooten, because this
We
is
can
about
make a whole
pianos.
podcast out of what was it like to play with Victor Wooten.
Right,
exactly.
We could go on for a while.
Yeah.
But that'll be a different podcast. We'll probably have you back on.
Okay.
What it's like to play with Wooten. Well, I think that's pretty good. That pretty well covers kind of where he is now. Is there anything else that you would want to add to that as far as
where I am right now, that's the stuff with Rich Robinson and with Jimmy Herring and King Baby. That's what's going on for me right now. That's where I am today, and that's kind of, yeah.
And just the whole story about King Baby is kind of it's kind of reassuring to us musicians who think that you can never get anywhere from where you're at. I would just say stick with it. If you're passionate about it, oftentimes these opportunities present themselves, and you never really know how or when they're going to pop up.
Exactly. And I guess I would like to just say what their names are if people were interested in who they. I said their first name, but Rick Lawler on guitar and vocals, Kevin Scott on bass, and Mark Rodabaugh on drums, and then me. That's King Baby.
That's pretty
we'll
awesome.
definitely have to check them out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you have a website yet? Or
Yeah, there's a website. I think it's kingbabymusic.com or something. I honestly don't know really, but you could Google it. And there's a Facebook page, and we've got a record recorded and mastered, and we're just going to be putting it out in a few months.
Well, what I heard sounded great.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks.
I'm
Thank
looking
you.
forward to it.
I appreciate it.
So what do you have coming up?
Well, actually, this Friday I'm going to be playing in Richmond, Virginia. Friday and Saturday, Richmond and Virginia, and then D.C. with this band called The New Stew. And it's basically what we've been doing is a Bill Withers tribute. We're playing Bill Withers live at Carnegie Hall, that album
Ooh,
Nice.
that he did in I want to say 74 or something like that. Bill Withers live at Carnegie Hall. We're doing that album, every song on it from the beginning to the end, not note for note. You know what I mean? But in that style, in that vein, it's trying to stay true. And it's the guy who's playing Bill Withers or playing, singing is Corey Glover from Living Colour, and then Roosevelt Collier, the pedal steel player who's played with everybody, but came up from the Lee Boys, a gospel band. He's on steel, and Kevin Scott's been playing with us, the bass player from King Baby, and Jared Stone is the one who put it together. He plays drums. Jan Rico Scott from Derek Truck's band is playing drums as well, so they're swapping between percussion and drums. Dave Yoke, who played with me in Susan Tedeschi's band, and he also played with Dr. John. So like a lot of great musicians, and we go out this Friday and do that. We've done shows last year, and they're just kind of filling in here and there. So,
My goodness.
Oh, it's pretty awesome.
yeah,
I'm a pretty big Dr. John fan. Actually,
yeah.
and yeah.
Me too.
Who isn't? I
Yeah,
guess.
I mean, it's like I could sit here and name every piano player that it's like, how do you do that?
yeah. He his take on the New Orleans style is
man.
Artful I
and
think,
authentic too,
and
but
authentic,
unique.
yeah.
It's like it's so great.
Yeah,
Love it.
Definitely. So, what are your influences as a keyboardist? Was there anybody that really inspired you stylistically?
Absolutely, a lot of people actually. I mean, some that probably doesn't sound like it would be, but I mean, I love Elton John and Bruce Hornsby. Keith Jarrett was a huge influence on
Wow,
me.
really?
My dad got me into Keith Jarrett when I was a little kid.
Oh, cool.
I mean, Neil Evans from Soul Live, John Medeski, Brad Meldow. God, he is amazing.
Where would I know him from now?
He's kind of like a little Keith, like a Keith Jarrett. I mean, he's like the new thing. I mean, he's amazing. In fact, I really kind of I love Keith Jarrett. I have this like thing for him, but Brad Meldow was just like. He's a genius,
What was it that you found inspiring about these people specifically? Because I mean, there are a lot of different styles represented there. Was there any like sort of consistent thing that you found that you liked in a keyboardist, wanted to imitate in a keyboardist?
Feeling. It's the way it made me feel.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely. It was how I felt when I listened to those people that was like, I need more of that, and I can't stop playing it over and over and over again,
Yeah.
And that inspiration of like, what are they doing? Why does that feel good? Like, how can I do that? How can I feel that way from myself, that's got to be, I mean, maybe that's a lame answer, but
No, I think we all go through that period. I think that's a transition into musicianhood. Yeah, that's a word now. I just made it up.
Musicianhood. Yeah,
I think that's part of the transition into being a musical person is, I want to understand why this makes me feel the way it does because I want to replicate.
Yep.
That feeling. I think we all go through that.
Yeah.
Some people eat a nice piece of cake and they're like, that was great.
Yeah.
Some people eat a nice piece of cake and they're like,
how did you make
I
this
want
cake?
to do that.
Yeah, exactly. That's totally true. Yeah.
Make it for myself whenever.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your beginnings. How old were you when you first decided that you loved the piano, and how did it begin? Did the piano find you, or did the piano find you, or did you find the piano?
I guess, the piano found me through somebody else, but my mom played piano. My grandfather was a trumpet player. My dad's side, his father was an organist. I mean, we've got music in the family. My mom sang with the Sweet Adelines, so there's a lot of music there. But I would say probably when I was about 5 years old, it was like a huge attraction for me. I heard my mom playing. We had a piano in the house. I'd always just go over and hit on the keys, and eventually after a couple of years, my brother was taking lessons. In fact, I think they forced him to take lessons and he hated it. But I would hear him playing and then I would go in and as a 6-year-old copy sort of what he was doing, sort of, not really.
Right.
But obviously they saw that there was something there, and so I started taking classical lessons. That was my background's in classical,
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So your first instructors were classical style then?
Yes,
huh?
absolutely. All the way through high school.
Yeah, it's there's an interesting sort of bifurcation in sort of the keyboard repertoire because there's classical pianists, but then there are piano players, and it's sort of a two different things. So dislikes about those two different styles? Were there things that you took from having classical instruction that informs your playing today? or not as much that, or how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, that has influenced my playing. I mean, I've definitely taken so much from the classical side into my playing even today. A lot of that may be technique,
Sure, yeah.
but also knowledge of that. Like you were just talking, it's kind of two different things, you know. And
Yeah.
even in theory, now I'm just hear me out here. Classical theory and what they use in those types of pieces of music is a lot different, until you get into more contemporary stuff, than what you see in jazz and fusion today. And you know, I wasn't learning that when I was learning classical. I was
Right, yeah,
learning
yeah.
all these extensions and modes and stuff. I mean, you know, Phrygian and
Right,
Locrian, Super Locrian, and all the different modes. We use Dorian, Mixolydian, all the ones that were, you know, the
Yeah.
most common ones and everything. So the theory was different. I wasn't learning those things. I was learning more classical theory.
Right,
You know, in
major
a
and
sense,
minor
if that makes sense at
scale-based
all. Maybe,
theory.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, major, minor, diminished, you know, some stuff like that. But that was the extent of it. And, you know, so getting out and playing and doing different style of music, I've learned more about, you know, music in general and how to use that in that style. So.
Yeah. Was there any self-teaching going on at some point? Did you reach a point where you thought, you know, well, I'm going to have to teach myself to play the way I really want to play?
Yeah, and that would be, you know, something that I would encourage other people to do, is to listen to who you like. And
Absolutely.
To mimic that person. Not to become that person, but to use that as well as other things to form, hopefully over time, if you persistent and you continue doing it, to form your own sound and your own language or style, you know. But absolutely, yeah, listen to tons of people, mimic them.
Here's a funny thing. I've noticed a good number of, a lot of classical musicians that I have known, that I've spoken to, who are classically trained and maybe play for a symphony or something like that. They do have a little bit of a challenge coming out and improvising. Like I think so, they're used to a very rigid structure, and I'd be curious to know how you, getting your start in classical music, was able to break away from that. I know obviously when you got into jazz, but what were some things that helped you break away from that?
That's a good question, because I've heard that too. You know, that's the case, and I remember at the School of Fine Arts there was this guy who could read like 4 measures ahead of what he was playing, and they were talking about he's graduating early and going to New York to play with the symphony, and you know. But I remember hearing also somehow that, you know, but if he didn't have the music in front of him, you know, it was like he didn't know what to do with the instrument. You know, he couldn't just sit down and make something up and play. And so I think that can be true, you know, with that style of music compared to others. But for me, I was always immersed in like music of all kinds, the Beatles, you know, the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. I mean, all that stuff was in there, and I was always trying to play that. My brother was a guitarist and singer and wrote songs, and I was always wanting to play in his band. He's my older brother, and so I was always doing that and messing around playing my own thing. It wasn't about just playing classical music and reading sheet music, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Although that was like my training, and I loved it. I love classical music. You know, I love it. You know.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a distinction in what you learn how to do. I think those classical pianists, they don't learn to improvise, because what they're learning to do is play music that was written by these brilliant composers. They're learning to play that.
Yep.
You know, in a way that is artful, and you know, the level of complexity they can reach is pretty huge. You know, but yeah, you know, they're not taught to compose music themselves, which is kind of what improvisation is, in a way, is yourself composing.
Exactly.
On the fly.
I wasn't, at least, you know, and in my experience, that wasn't the case, you know, so it was something that I did on my own, you know, and I was always down in the music room playing, whether I was just improvising, you know, listening to Keith Jarrett and then trying to go and play my version of that style of music, and, you know, like whatever it was, I was always doing that. And, but I'll tell you, like, there's nothing against classical. I mean, that's just like, they're amazing. And to have that discipline and that dedication to do what, you know, to do that. Like, I wasn't good enough to be a concert pianist.
The amount of hours they spend practicing.
Oh
alone.
my gosh. I mean, it's ridiculous. So there's, you know, hats off to them,
Yeah.
I just kind of moved away from that personally.
Right. Okay, so how long did you take piano before you just broke away and decided to go self-taught, or did you?
Through high school.
Through
So
high
from
school.
when I was, 7 or 8 years old to in music school, like South Shore Conservatory in Massachusetts, outside of Boston. When I was there, moved to Alabama, went to the Alabama School of Fine Arts. So I was just always, that was the main focus for me, and it was just happened to be classical.
Without naming any names, or you could name a name if you want to, your favorite instructor. What did you take away
Mr.
from
Weller.
What did you take away from him?
I took away from him, I was inspired by him, by his passion for music, and by, I mean, really it was his love and passion for music, but the way he cared so much about his students
Yeah.
doing something with music and like having it be meaningful to them. Like, I will never forget that guy. And I've had other teachers too that I thought were great, but I mean, Mr. Weller is, and I'm sure he's deceased now. That was when I was in junior high, 12 years old or something.
Yeah, wow.
So, but he's probably deceased. I have no idea, but love that guy. He was a sax player. He taught like junior high band and music, and then like would go out into Boston and play gigs at night, and that was his life, and he loved it. And he had me actually, because I was playing piano, there wasn't a place really in the school band for piano. He had me do tuba parts on a keyboard with like a MIDI controller thing.
Yeah,
so I was
nice.
doing the tuba in the band because they didn't have a tuba player. And he told me, if you learn to read music, because I couldn't read music at all, he said, you learn to read music, because he knew I liked to improvise and do more of the, at least at the time, starting to listen to fusion and all that kind of jazz and stuff. He said, I'm going to give you a fake book at the end of the year if you learn to do this. And he did. He like at the end of the year when they hand out awards, so and so whatever, and he handed that to me, and that was really cool.
Let's tell our audience what a fake book is.
Yeah, we
Some
should
of them
probably.
might not know.
That went right over
yeah, I
my
guess
head
so.
because,
They're
of
like,
course,
what?
we know what a
We've
fake.
all had to deal with the fake
Why would
book.
you want something that's not real?
Right. The fake book, I guess, it's kind of like a very thick a book of jazz
Bug
standards.
squasher, but it's got all of the classic jazz standards.
Yeah.
In lead sheet
Lead
form.
sheet, yeah, like some chords and the melody, and that's it. You got to do the
Exactly.
rest.
Yeah, we actually had a bass version of the. It
yeah.
had the melodies written in bass clef,
Right.
so we could play them on our bass, and then had the chord changes.
I've
above
seen
it,
that.
so we
Yeah,
could
that's cool.
improvise. Yeah.
But it's like the Bible, the jazz Bible, kind of.
It really is.
Everybody who does that's got one.
Yeah, all the way up to I've still got my tattered pages missing,
Right, exactly.
coffee stained copy laying around somewhere.
Any kind of booze you can imagine has been spilled on my fake book.
Yeah, exactly.
So there you go. So we're talking about instructors. You are an instructor yourself, right?
I do teach some. I have in two different capacities. One, I teach piano lessons. In fact, right before I came over here, I was teaching a lesson on Skype. That's what I do, is teach over Skype. A friend of mine, freejazzlessons.com, has an amazing site with tons of people on it. He puts all these videos out, instructional videos. It's amazing if you want to learn how to play, and it's free. Now, you can pay and get a premium thing where you have access to private instruction and a lot more detail, but just going on the site without paying anything too. So it's a huge resource for people that are wanting to learn to play jazz piano and stuff like that. He's a great friend of mine. Met him on the road playing out music, and he asked me to be a teacher on his site. So when people sign up for that, I'm one of the instructors that they send to, and we do it over Skype, basically. So I teach that. I don't have a ton of students, because I'm on the road a lot. It's hard to do that, but I do have, I guess, about 5 or 6 students. And then, I teach music and fundamentals of music to 4th through 12th grade at a private school here in Birmingham. And I've actually worked with a couple of different private schools in teaching music and stuff like that, and I really enjoy that. So that's pretty much it as far as me teaching.
You don't know how thrilled I was when Heather came home and said, "Chloe's taking the fiddle lessons." I said, "How cool is that? Who's your teacher?" Matt Slocum. You just all things music, man. My stepdaughter Chloe, she ended up she goes to the Waldorf school.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't know if that's the one.
That was the one I started at originally. I'm not teaching there anymore. I'm teaching at a different one now. But yeah, I was teaching there for, I don't know, 2-3 years, which came about because their music teacher they weren't going to be able to do it or whatever the deal was. And they were like just not going to have a music program. And my daughter was in school there.
Unacceptable.
And I thought, you know what? I don't play violin, but I can get a violin. I understand music enough, half step, whole step. I can sit there and figure it out and get a little bit better at it. And so I said, look, I don't know violin. I'll teach half violin, and the other I'm going to teach fundamentals of music because that I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I turned it into a violin fundamentals of music class, and I taught for 2 years because my daughter went to school there, and I wanted them to have music.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and and so that's a cool connection there.
Yeah, very cool, man. Let's talk a little bit about your students. As an instructor, what are some good and bad habits that you would like to address from your students?
Oh man.
Aside from the obvious, practice.
Right. It varies from person to person, as far as the piano or just as far musically overall. Because you could teach an instrument and you can teach music no matter what instrument you're playing.
Let's address the piano specifically.
Yeah. So, because of my classical background, I'm big on technique and scales, stamina, and things like that. But I'm not, I don't pull out the whip. You know what I'm saying? What I want to know from students is what they want to get out of music. Nobody ever asked me that. But what do you want to get out of music? Do you want to be able to hear a song on the radio and go and play it? Or do you want to be able to read sheet music and play through that? Or do you want to be able to get a lead sheet and figure out how to read a lead sheet and actually interpret that into a piece of music that you could play with a band? What are your goals? And so I do that first, and then we set up a plan of how are we going to attain those goals? Now, along the way, I'm throwing in other stuff that I think is necessary, even though they weren't saying, hey, I want to do this, that, or the other. And so that's kind of where I start with them, because I think that's important. People get disinterested if they're not doing what they want to do, and they don't feel like they're growing the way inside they feel like they need to grow.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think, maintaining a positive connection, having them understand why they're having to do something.
Yeah, exactly.
I've taught ear training a lot.
Yep,
and
me too.
it is so easy for them to think of ear training as just this. Torture that we're putting. It's boring. It's torture that we're putting them through. It's I'll never be able to be good at this sort of thing. It's very important for them to understand, why it is that this is important for what you want to do.
Right.
It's
absolutely.
Yeah.
I even teach that at this fourth through 12th grade thing that I'm doing. It's just that exact thing. And the other thing is, in general, I'm speaking here, but, for me, it's super important that I understand the degrees of a scale and what that means, what that makes up diatonically, what's going on at first. Because any song that's on the radio, if I understand that, I can play it I can hear it once and pretty much go back and play it. As long as I can remember what the melody was in my head.
Sure.
With ear training, everything, I know we go to the 6 is minor, 2 is minor, 3 is minor. There could be secondary dominance. You can hear that stuff. And so if I understand that, and I understand how that's made up, I can play any song. 90% of songs that there are in Western music are going to be based around that idea.
Yeah, and most of them are going to be easier than what you're having to do in ear training.
Exactly, way easier.
So if you can pass ear training, you got a real advantage.
You're made. You got it made.
So that's why we're doing this to you.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, now you know. Yeah. But I like how you answered that question, going back a little bit, because you can save yourself so much heartache and so much guesswork if you just ask them straight up, what do you want to get out of music?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's a very important question that doesn't get asked enough, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't either.
Why are you doing this? What do you hope to?
Yeah. instead of me going, I know what you need to know.
Yeah.
You should do this. No, don't say anything. Just do what I tell you to do, and you're going to be great.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know what's good for somebody else. What do you want to know? What can I'll tell you everything I know. What is it? What do you want to know? And I'll figure out the best way to give it to you.
That's a good teacher. in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think so. I wish I had more teachers like that.
Right.
But,
I wish
whatever.
I'd had more teachers like that too. And I definitely had some, but rather than just sort of unloading information on me,
Right. That's not useful. Like, how can we learn something that we're going to learn, as far as theory or, and applying that to what it is that we're doing right now? Not just some random stuff that, like, next week you don't even remember what we were talking about because you're
Right.
not using it. Like, let's figure out, we're going to learn this song or we're going to do this. How do these things apply? What can I show you that makes sense to this so that we can take that, apply it to this, and then I can use that on another song? Like, oh, yeah, I was doing that in this tune. Oh, and God, there's 2 5s in every song I've ever played. It's like, they don't know they know what they want, but they don't know how to get it. And that's what a teacher is for, right? Is
Absolutely.
to say, here's what you want. We're going to go for this, and I'm going to help you get there, So,
And communicate it to other musicians.
yeah. I mean, music's a language, right?
Yeah,
it's
it
like the universal, the first, before written language, there was music.
Yeah.
It's a language, like how you want to tell your story.
Yeah.
I'm gonna touch on this really briefly, but we don't need to spend too much time on it because it kind of goes without saying that at some point you're gonna want to learn to read music. Now the guitarists, they have their tablature.
Right.
Pianists, if you're gonna be a pianist, you pretty much have to learn how to read music,
Pretty much read
and you
music.
have to read 4 lines at one time, right? Oftentimes,
Well, 2 staves.
2 staffs, yeah.
Yeah.
But I know sometimes like choral accompanists will have to do like 4 textures at a time or reductions of a bigger piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you want, because the piano is covering everything, the whole spectrum.
It is as large as the orchestra in terms of range.
Exactly. So there you go. Yeah, you're covering all that. Yeah. Good luck.
I actually. All right, I'm not going to get on my soapbox for too long, I promise. I actually think anybody, no matter what your instrument, should be reading music.
Notation,
Notation, not tablature, but notation, because
I agree.
tablature is for guitar specifically or bass specifically. Notation is universal.
Right.
All musicians learn to read. If you don't know how to read music, it's akin to not knowing how to read and write in the rest of society. You're suffering that level of a disadvantage in being able to communicate with other musicians.
Yep.
Okay, now
There's
step
al-
down from my soapbox.
You know, there's-
No, that's great, man. I agree with you.
Well, there's also things that you can get from notation that you can't get from tablature, like
Absolutely.
dynamics.
Oh, yeah.
Or the slow down
You
rhythm.
know, I mean, I've seen tablature that just has, well, these 2 numbers are closer together, so we must play that really.
Yes. When the hell do I play that one?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's a little more specific than that.
I think it's great, tablature or like the Nashville number system,
Yeah,
those
yeah.
things. It's great, but it's almost like, okay, first I need to learn how to do it, and then I can figure out the shortcuts. Mm-hmm. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But like, if I don't know how to do it in the first place, I've never really, I don't know.
Yeah.
To each his own, But
Yeah.
I agree with you. I feel like you should be able to read at least at some sort of basic to intermediate level, so that if someone hands you a lead sheet, you know what a quarter note and an eighth note
Yeah,
is and
you can
sounds
figure that
like,
out,
and
yeah.
like,
Mhm.
you can be, and then your experience kicks in, and I'm reading it, and you're really just playing it from heart, but. But anyway,
Revealing secrets from the sight reading musicians.
yeah, exactly.
That's why we're here.
We just kind of picked it out beforehand.
I still do a lot of times myself. Let's move on to your practice schedule. You're a very accomplished pianist, as far as I'm concerned.
Thanks,
You
man.
play with some great names. You can pretty much handle anything, it seems like. Tell me about your practice schedule.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a practice schedule, but I play every day. And, you can't go and play with somebody if you're not playing. If you just pick your instrument up on Friday to go do the gig, maybe you can do that. I don't know.
You'll get really good at doing the gig.
You'll
Yeah.
get really good at doing that gig and playing those chords that you have for that gig and that solo. that you
and
do.
those songs that you played 100 times, you'll know
You
them
got
backwards
that.
and forwards.
Yeah.
but
And then you go into a situation where that's not the case, and you ask to do some studio work or go out on tour with somebody, and they're like, we need you to do this music, and it's like, So yes, I do practice. I still do scales and hand and exercises. Like that's just part of me. It's kind of ingrained in me. I like it. It's good for me. It gets me going. And then I like to listen to music and try to learn it. Like I'll take Joey DiFrancesco and go, what in the world is going on here? There's only 12 notes, but I don't know where any of the ones he's playing are. It's like, so how do we do that? So I slow stuff down and I learn it note for note and I go over it and I try to incorporate it in that. And for me, when I practice, like a lot of what I'm doing too is like learning for different bands that I'm playing with.
Sure.
So like this thing with Rich Robinson, I had to learn 86 tunes for 4 nights because every night was going to be 20-something tunes and they were all different.
Wow.
And we went up and had 3 days worth of rehearsal. And then we did right after that, or 3.5 days rehearsal and 4 shows, bam. And that's it. You got one chance because we're not doing the song again. So like learning all that music, it takes time. And to me, I need to listen to the song. Then I need to kind of sit down and just mess around with it. I mean, it's like a process for me. And start playing around with it. Oh, that's cool. It goes to 4 here. Oh, wow, the 3's dominant. What's going on here? Okay, we're doing this. And then I need to get kind of serious more into it. And I take the song after I already know it so that when I'm listening to it, I can say, I know what chords are happening here. Then I get away from my instrument and I listen to it again. And I go, without my instrument. Because if I've got my instrument in front of me, I'm going to be playing.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm doing this. And then I'm learning it wrong. Not all the time, but I'm like, I take it away from the instrument and I listen to it in the car or somewhere else and I go, oh, he's not playing B flat there.
Right.
Like, why was I doing that? I don't know, because I was just like, messing around the whole time. So that's part of that for me is to go back and listen away from my instrument. Once I've familiarized myself with it and then go in and start tearing that down. Learning it sometimes piece by piece if I need to, or if there's a section where there's a real, serious piano part that has to be exact or whatever it is, and I take that and I do that, and then I consistently want to go back and listen to it without my instrument, and then go back and practice it, and that's how I approach stuff like that. To then where I don't use the music anymore, and then I play the song without the music. And then sometimes I got to go back and go, what was happening there? And I do it again, and it's somewhat of a process. And I have to do that until I feel like I can get up on stage and go, I don't have to worry about this. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
As great as I can make it.
Right. Yeah. That's fascinating. I hear a lot of passion in that process.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, people think of practicing as a chore.
A chore,
really?
yeah.
But I've never felt that way myself, and it's really refreshing to hear the passion, and because it's not I have to learn this song. It's I want to learn this song. I want to get it right. When you're listening to something outside of your instrument, it's like there's a lot of dedication and a lot of drive there to get it. To the way you want it to, right? And
absolutely.
I think this is fundamental to being a good musician, is really wanting to do this. If you're doing this because you feel like you have to, for the love of God, stop. Yeah,
right. Yeah, please. Save us all.
Right. You're wasting your time. You're wasting our time.
Right. Yeah. And I think the one thing that even passionate musicians, myself included, can be guilty of is feeling like practice is a chore.
Sure. Sometimes it is, but when it becomes your profession and your career, sometimes you got to do stuff you don't want to do. And as much as I love music, I've tried to quit music twice, and both times in my life. This was the last time was probably 20 years ago, but I've tried to quit. Like, I can't do this. It's not working. I want to do something else. Something would come back fall into my lap, and it was like, this is an opportunity I can't pass up. I got to do this. So I know this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that, it could be anything. There's going to be times when it's the thing that you love the most in the world. There's going to be times when you might be bored of it, or you're just don't really want to do it right now.
Burn out.
That's just life with anything. So, but I just hear music and everything. Like, I remember taking my kids when they were younger, like the French fries at Wendy's, is a fifth. Da-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na-na. It would go da-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na-na, a fifth. Da-na-na-na-na. And so I would always be like, oh, fries are ready.
Fries are ready.
And so, like everything is, to me, is that way somewhat. I just can't turn it off. Songs are going on. I'm thinking about what the chords are, what are the intervals, how are they relating, I love it.
My girlfriend makes fun of me all the time for walking around the house singing in solfege.
Right.
Like I'll get the theme from Star Trek Voyager in stuck in my head or something, and I'll start picking that out in solfege in my head, and before I know it, I'm singing the solfege version.
Exactly.
Walking around.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think if you're one of those few fortunate people to make a career of your passion, then you should expect to have a time or two where it's going to be a job. You know?
Right.
That's just how life goes, I guess.
Right. But you got to be grateful that you're doing what you love. Like how many people are, they're okay with what they're doing, but it's like, man, if they could be an astronaut, that would just be, But, that's a fortunate thing that I have to be very careful with and guard the fact that I get to do what I love because it could very easily go a different direction, and it's not something to scoff at or take advantage of.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing for me. Maybe somebody else wouldn't want my life, but I'm happy with what I'm doing.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think you have to be happy with it to be a good musician.
Yeah,
I really do. Because we don't get paid as much as stock analysts or
not anywhere near. At least I haven't been.
Educators educators in general don't get paid anywhere near what they're worth.
I agree.
And then to be a musician
That's
and an
the truth.
educator,
you're really screwed.
You kind of expect to be pretty screwed, but here we are, proof that it can work. It can work.
It can work if you want it to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess if you guys want to, we can get right into the instrument itself.
Sure.
The
Love
piano.
It. Sounds great.
So I didn't realize until our recent conversation that you actually do way more. You tune.
I tune, repair, rebuild pianos. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
How did that become a thing?
I've been doing it about 15 years, and I went. There's this course you can take. It's like a 2-year thing, and it's over online. It's through online, but you have to send videos of you doing. Back then, when it was video. Well, I'm sure they do it differently now, but. You send videos of the different things that you're doing, and they ask in the course curriculum, and they critique you and tell you what to do. And so it's an accredited school with the Piano Technicians Guild, and so I did that, and then just started tuning and repairing people's pianos, if you want to call it that, for free, and for a couple years. And then it was like, you know what, I'm getting better at this. I should start charging. And so I just started slowly putting some prices on it, and then got up to where I am now, and I've been doing it. I love it. I love it. I love working on pianos. I love making them work and function and replacing parts, rebuilding. When I say rebuilding, a rebuild on a piano could be anything from replacing a hammer to, fixing keys, replacing keys, rekeying, retopping the keys. That's considered rebuild, whereas a restoration would be like completely redoing the whole piano back to its original condition or as best as possible. So I don't do that, but I've been doing it about 15 years. And I love it. Yeah.
How many pianos do you own, Matt?
How many pianos do I own? I've got 6 pianos.
Oh, wow.
Not keyboards.
Pianos.
Or organs or whatever. Just
physical
as far
wooden.
as pianos, yeah, I've got 3 baby grands, like an old 1902 upright. It's beautiful. I've got, some Yamaha studio professionals. I've got consoles. I've got old spinets. I've got a couple of different things,
I've got a piano for you to look at, Matt.
Okay, great.
And maybe we'll do a follow-up episode or something like that. But
right.
It's a 1902 Bush and Gertz.
Wow, okay.
And
This old piano.
This old piano.
It's a new show.
And when I got it from my aunt and uncle, it was middle A440. What should have been A440 was an F sharp.
Wow.
Up.
So it was a minor third
lower.
flat. It was a minor third
okay.
flat.
Minor third flat.
That
Wow,
piano
that's
flat.
huge.
Yeah, so for the entire piano to be tuned in standard, they had to take the entire thing up and stretch it inward. I guess whatever you say. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called a pitch raise, or they stretch the strings.
Yeah.
I imagine they did it over time though, not just at once, because that could break strings, especially on a 100-year-old.
I want to say it
piano.
took a couple of sessions.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Are pianos typically restrung ever? I mean, I know,
It's not very often, but
Really?
it depends
Okay.
on the quality of the instrument and the person that owns it. If they want to do that, it's expensive.
Yeah, because
I've done it.
We
Yeah.
guitarists and bassists, we break strings all the time.
Yeah.
You just head over to. I was about to say Nuncies. They don't even exist.
Yeah, exactly.
anymore. you head over to Bailey Brothers, whatever, buy some new strings, and imagine it's more complicated.
It is more complicated, and as far as that, I replace strings on pianos all the time. But as far as like replacing all the
Complete
strings,
restringing,
which
yeah.
on after piano strings are made to last about 40-ish years where they're elastic.
Yeah.
And then after that, they're not as elastic, and you go to tune them, and they don't stretch; they pop.
Yeah.
Especially at some of the pressure points, which typically is like right below the V bar, the pressure bar, and the tuning pin, and they typically break there all the time. And but replacing strings, yeah, I do that. That's a common thing. Strings are broken, this, that, and the other. But yeah, it's definitely more involved than changing a guitar string, I would think, and harder to get to.
Definitely harder to get
Especially
to.
depending on the type of piano.
You can change a guitar string between songs at the gig if you're really good. you
Right.
know?
Yeah, this is a little more involved. But.
Yeah.
Back to that piano I have. Now the problem is the F note below middle C. They can't seem to. There's three strings.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right on that note.
Yeah.
One of those strings wants to go down to E.
Right. That's because it's lost its tension. There's no torque there.
It doesn't. They try to retune it.
Yeah, you just replace it with a bigger pin.
Mm-hmm.
So we get whenever you replace all the strings, you would replace all the tuning pins.
Mm.
You go up 2 sizes bigger. You can only do that so many times over the piano life. So maybe you could do that about 4 times before. Most pianos, at least somewhat newer pianos, have the plate that goes over where the tuning pins go in. Some of the older pianos, like maybe even on yours, I don't know. Sometimes. It's just done a little differently. So, but you can replace them so many times because you have to keep going bigger because the hole is loose now. So you put a bigger tuning pin in there and it sticks better. So there's a couple different options as long as the pin block isn't cracked. If the pin block is cracked, then obviously that's why it's loose. And if you stick a bigger pin in there, it's just going to make the crack bigger. So you got to make sure see what's going on in there. But that can be fixed. Yeah, I could do that for you.
Well, enough about my problem.
I've actually seen pianists break a string too.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard them go like, ting.
Oh,
Yeah, no, I've heard
In mid-performance?
it was in rehearsal, dress rehearsal, the night of the performance.
Right.
Oh,
So it was a problem, but they managed to call somebody and get an emergency string stuck up. But yeah, it can happen, just like in that Rachmaninoff movie.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't there? I don't remember what style. What?
Talking about Shine. that
Yeah,
movie?
yeah.
David
I couldn't
Helfgott.
think
I
of the
wanna
name of
see
that
that
movie.
so bad. I
Yeah.
still haven't seen that.
Yeah, the Rack 3.
Man,
Yeah.
that was an amazing movie.
Yeah.
Really kind of dark too, but it was really
Yeah,
cool.
kind of dark, but a really super good movie. So, but yeah, there was some type of piano that was invented, and it may just be the pianoforte, as opposed to the hammer clavier. I'm trying to steer us into piano history now.
Yeah.
It was built because Beethoven was just destroying pianos with the way he played, because he was so
Right.
he was hitting it so hard that that everything was just
With the hair
falling to
flopping
pieces.
everywhere.
Yeah,
exactly.
And Liszt had the same problem, and some other people. So it may have been the difference between the hammer clavier and the pianoforte, which is the modern instrument, right? But it
And the mechanism inside that piano was different, which is why it was
Yeah.
called a pianoforte, where it's called a piano because we have dynamics with it. And the hammers, we
Right.
can hit soft and we can hit loud. Whereas
Soft.
back then, the mechanism wasn't capable of doing that. So it was pretty much you hit it and it was going to go bing, no matter what.
Yeah. Hence the name pianoforte, soft
Exactly.
or loud.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, pianoforte, yeah. So yeah, you got the history down there for sure. But also pianos back in that day only had 2 strings. It's interesting because pianos now, like a grand piano, will have the very far left pedal. There's 3 pedals, and it's called the una corda pedal. And it doesn't actually make sense with what's happening inside the piano anymore because back in the day there were instead of 3 strings like you were talking about, up on the treble and the tenor and the treble section, there were only 2. So when you press the una corda pedal and it actually slid the action over, the hammers were literally only striking 1 string.
So you get
1
sort of a
chord.
different timbral.
Exactly. It gives you some dynamics, some can be really quiet. Well, it's still called an una corda pedal, but now it's striking 2. It's really a duocorda pedal, but I mean, it's still called that from where it came from, you know. And so
Yeah, una corda meaning 1 string.
right,
1 string.
1 chord, 1 string, you
Yeah.
know, and so, but that's just not the case anymore.
Let's talk about the pedals
Yeah.
for those who don't play the piano.
Okay, yeah.
There's 3 pedals typically, right?
There are typically 3 and they can do different things.
Are they customizable, or
Typically not. You would buy a piano but could you rebuild something or, you know, aftermarket, put something weird in there? Yeah, you could. But I mean, typically you buy it and it has certain features.
what are the key functions that these perform?
Well, the far right is a sustaining pedal. And obviously that lifts the dampers off the string. When you strike it, it's going to ring until it either dies over time or you let go of the pedal and the dampers shut the string off. You know, so that's what that one does. And we just talked about the una corda pedal, which is the very far left pedal. And now that is on a grand piano. So on an upright piano, you're not going to have an una corda pedal.
Okay.
You're going to have something that's called a practice pedal or soft pedal. And that's what happens is that the mechanism pushes the hammer rail forward slightly so that the distance between the hammer and the string is lessened and therefore is not as much force, so it's going to be softer. It's supposed to be mimicking the una corda pedal, but it does not do the same exact thing, and it doesn't really. It's just something they could do to fit in with the vertical piano. But anyway, so that's that case. Then the middle pedal, it depends. On a really nice grand piano, the middle pedal is called a sostenuto pedal, and that pedal is I can say play a chord, press that pedal down, and it's going to sustain only those notes. So then I can play all around that I want to, and it will not sustain, but those particular notes will. So I could do da-da-da right here, and then go up or whatever, and that's going to continue to ring. Only those notes that I had to press with that pedal.
Got it.
So it's a really cool feature on a nice grand piano. The pedal that were to mimic that, which a lot of what you probably would have in your grandmother's piano or spinet or whatever in a vertical piano, is a bass sustain. So that you're kind of mimicking that in the sense that I can do some stuff down low and that'll still ring, but the dampers won't release, be held up off the tenor and the treble section. So it's kind of mimicking that, but it's not the same because the sostenuto pedal, I could have notes in the high range sustaining and play down here and not. So it's really an advanced mechanism. And then there's with like Asian pianos, the middle pedal is something called a soft pedal or practice pedal, and it's actually a piece of felt that is lowered down between the hammers and the strings, and it creates a mute. It's a really quiet, muted sound. And you can typically press that pedal down and push it to the left, and it'll lock in place, so you don't have to mess with it anymore.
That's pretty cool.
You know, those are some different types of things. It just depends on, I think originally there was only 2 pedals.
Right.
It wasn't always 3 pedals.
Yeah, there was a sustain and a sostenuto. Right?
Or the una corda
Or the
pedal.
una corda,
Yeah,
right,
exactly,
yeah.
for dynamics and stuff. Yeah. Yep. So
What are some things you might recommend for proper maintenance?
tune your piano twice a year minimum. If you're going to be using it all the time, if you're a studio, you're playing it all the time, you might tune it. A studio might tune it every week for a session.
Wow.
Doesn't hurt a piano to tune it, but it hurts a piano to let it sit over time. There's 240 pounds of pressure on every single string, and typically an average of 230 strings, which gives you roughly 50,000 pounds of pressure that are on that piano when it's tuned to A440.
No,
That's why
actually
that
sat there
plate's
and-
in there.
I thought about it.
Yeah.
Because it would crumble. It would just, that amount of pressure, it would just break in half if you didn't have this iron plate in there. That's why that's there. That holds, that's 3/4 of the weight of a piano is that plate in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure where we were going with that, but there's a lot of pressure on each string individually. And what did you ask me?
We're just talking about good ideas for maintenance.
Oh, maintenance. So tune it. Because of that pressure, there's points that the string goes around. There's the hitch at the bottom and goes up through the bridge where there's bridge pins.
Mm-hmm.
And that 240 pounds is pressing against that bridge pin, and it creates a kink in the string, right? And it sits there for 3 years. And then we go to tune it, and we pull that string up, and that kink is now in the speaking length of the string between the pressure bar and the bridge that you're going to actually hear through that soundboard when it rings. And if you've got an inconsistency in that string, you're going to have something that's called false beats. False beats happen in pianos regardless of what piano it is. I mean, you could have a Steinway that's going to have false beats in it. They're just not as prominent.
Is that kind of old-timey, westerny sort of sound that some pianos
that
get?
could be. That could definitely cause that, as well as just being out of tune slightly.
Yeah,
you know?
well,
But a false beat is when one string beats blah, 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 or blah, 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 or however it wants to ring without any opposing string. So when you have 3 strings, you tune them all exactly the same frequency. It's called tuning in unison, and they all ring the same. And you can hear as they get close, just like with the guitar. It's like, whoa, 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 and it gets in. Well, if you've got a string that has an inconsistency in it or something going on with that string where it's wobbling on its own, you can't tune that out. It's still going to be wobbling even if it's in unison with these other 2 strings because it's in the string itself. So that's called a false beat, and that happens when you don't take care of your piano, you know. So I would tune it twice a year. If you just can't do that, you got to tune it no less than once a year, or, you know, you're really hurting the instrument, you know. That's one thing.
Well, and I know people who haven't tuned their pianos in decades
Oh,
and
like
decades.
20 years, and it's like, why didn't it sound good? You know?
Oh, right.
Then you go to tune it, and they want it to sound like it just came from the store, and you're like, this thing, we just like moved it a half step, and it's just all out of whack. And
Takes a little more.
I've got bad news for you. You know,
The people that I was working with, my piano tuners, suggested that I have this little device that kind of stretches out across the bottom base of the piano, and it's like a little warm, like a little.
oh yeah, piano life-saving system.
Yeah, it's like a little warm
you
kind of
get
bar.
damp chasers, and it just helps to it heats the piano, so it helps with a little bit with temperature and getting rid of moisture, because temperature and humidity are what destroy pianos. A piano wants to be 72 degrees and 49% humidity.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, who does that, right? So, but that's really what that instrument wants to be at, pretty much, roughly, you know, in there, you know. And so they have these systems you can put in. One is that bar, and then more advanced systems like that include that bar and a tank of water with a little computer that says, it's time to release water into the air and time to dry it out.
Holy
And
cow.
it goes back and forth, and you just add water when it tells you to, and it takes care of the humidity and the temperature of the piano.
cigar humidors work on the same principle. Just as an aside.
We have a cigar enthusiast here.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the exact same thing.
Want to move towards the closing end of...
I guess I should talk. I have a few notes here on the history that you guys might dig.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
yeah.
Let's
I have
do
a few numbers you might find interesting. We'll see if I can. It might take me a second to compose this.
Okay.
Because I made a whole bunch of horribly written notes. Well, like we were saying before the piano, we just had the harpsichord and the clavichord and the organ, I believe, also. But
Pipe organ, yeah.
the pipe organ.
Yeah.
But none of these instruments were capable of having dynamics in that it would only play one volume level.
Right.
Well, actually, I had the clavichord allowed for expressive control and volume, but it was still too quiet for the average concert hall.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It was
I'll
kind
double check on that. and
Yeah,
I'll
that's cool. Yeah, I
edit
don't
it out
know.
If not, but
Yeah, it was kind of a forerunner.
yeah.
Right.
Whereas it could play loud or soft, but
No in between.
that was it. Yeah,
It was just
yeah.
extreme or something.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like really loud or
You could play. Yeah, I think it had I'd have to research this. I think it had like a switch or something, but you either played it loud or you played it soft. It
Right.
wasn't like the
Right.
dynamic version of the modern instrument.
right.
Organs had no pipe organs and things had no dynamics whatsoever. If you wanted
It's
the
a wind
organ to
instrument, essentially.
yeah, if you wanted the organ to be louder, you pulled out more stops to send wind through more pipes,
Yeah.
and that's still the way they work.
That's where the expression "pulling out all the stops" came from.
That's where the
my
expression
understanding.
"pull out all the stops" came from.
And if you look at an organ, say like today's modern organ, I say but like the B3 or those types of Hammond organs, that it's not called a volume pedal, although many people call it that. It's called an expression pedal because it's not actually controlling volume.
Yeah.
It's actually resisting, which is creating an expression in the sound, which gives you what is heard as volume dynamics with an organ. So it's actually not a volume pedal. I learned that from the Hammond tech that works on mine. So,
And that's a cool instrument itself.
oh yeah, that's exactly. It's basically what was mocked after or mimicking a pipe organ, but portable.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
the drawbars that are pulled out are actually in feet, 16 foot, 8 foot, or whatever, so to mimic the size of a pipe.
Nice. So we had the clavichord, and then we had the harpsichord. The harpsichord could only do one level, one volume. It was a plucked instrument.
They had a plectrum, yeah.
A little quill or something in
Quill.
there.
That's yeah. So speaking of harpsichords, there was a gentleman named Bartolomeo Cristofori who was an accomplished harpsichord maker from Padua, Italy, which was a Republic of Venice. Now he was eventually asked to move to Florence by none other than Ferdinando de' Medici, who was a harpsichordist.
De Medici
So yeah, he was the that's the big family,
in Florence, yeah.
the big wealthy family.
that ushered in the Renaissance a few years prior. So the exact date is kind of up in the air, but it was said that he probably invented the piano somewhere around 1698, 1700, somewhere in that time frame.
Right.
But it was initially he called it the oh my god, let me see if I can do this. My Italian's a little bit
Right. Yeah, me too.
Un cimballo di cipresso di piano e forte,
Pretty good.
which translates to a keyboard of cypress with soft and loud.
Right. Soft and loud. Yeah. Piano forte.
I guess that became cumbersome, so they just called it the piano
You're
forte,
right,
right.
yeah.
which is Italian for soft and
Soft loud, yeah.
Soft loud.
Yeah. Which is what it is today. Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
people didn't really know about this until 1711. This gentleman named, another hard name,
Yeah.
a gentleman named Scipione Maffei, he wrote an article about the piano and had a diagram of the mechanism.
Right.
And then this was reproduced in German, translated in German, and then widely distributed. So a lot of the piano makers were using this as their guideline,
Wow.
this particular article as
Sure.
their guideline on how to build pianos.
Yeah.
One of these builders was a German organ maker, actually, named Gottfried Silbermann, who was actually eventually able to add the sustain to the piano.
Wow. Okay.
And he brought this to Bach in the 1730s, and Bach wasn't impressed. He said the higher notes were too soft for you to say this instrument has any dynamic range, that the higher notes were too soft.
Well, I guess he would know.
Well,
Well, how deaf was he by that point?
Yeah, I gotta say, yeah, maybe he
It's,
did.
You know, I mean, I'm just thinking, could his higher frequencies have been sort of damaged by that
Yeah,
point in his life? I mean, I don't know what age he was in the 1730s.
Yeah, I have no idea.
well,
That's
but
true.
apparently
could
this
look
guy
that
he took it to heart because he went ahead and improved on that. And then
Oh, okay.
by 1747, Bach was stoked about the piano.
Oh,
Wow.
okay. Oh.
Awesome.
And the rest is history,
And
The rest is history.
as
Yes.
they say. Well, okay, I think we covered the instrument pretty well, I think.
I think so.
So, okay, well, is there anything that you would like to impart to a beginning pianist that they may not have considered? Words of encouragement. We covered a lot, I know.
Well, I mean, I don't want to be cliche, but follow,
Cliche is good.
follow your heart and keep playing. Don't stop. Don't take things personally. Just get back up and go at it. Don't make things personal. Don't take things personal. Like learn your instrument, keep practicing, find out ways to be more engaged in it. And then I would always want to say, have a good attitude, do your homework, and show up on time.
That's good advice for anything.
Those three things will make you lose the gig, no matter how good you are.
Boy, man, we talked about that, and we used some choice language, but I was able to edit that out, actually.
Good.
But we were talking about people who are just difficult to work with,
Oh,
who have very high egos, and they just make the whole experience miserable for everybody
And at
else.
some point, it doesn't even matter how good you are.
It really doesn't.
You know?
Nobody wants to be around you.
Yeah.
And it's like he said, no one's going to call you and say, hey, we were going to hire you for this gig coming up, but we decided not to.
Yeah,
because
you'll
you're-"
never get that call.
Right, you'll never know.
You just
Nobody
won't
will,
get the
yeah.
call.
Like-
And he'll be like, why am I so, why are things so slow?
Yeah,
for me?"
people will just never call you for gigs, and then you're like, yeah, I don't have any gigs. I'm not making any money.
I'm the best in town,
I'm the yeah.
and I know it.
Yeah.
Screw
Hello.
this. Yeah. I'm gonna go into my dad's paper making business or something, you know. And they'll never realize.
Yeah.
But I think that is good advice because it's one of those things that it's easy to get a big head if you're a musician.
Right.
If you're a good musician and people are out there cheering you on and looking adoringly at you, it's easy to get a big head.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do your homework so that you have something you can contribute what's expected of you, and you have other options as well, like so that I can say, well, okay, well, what if I did this or that? You know, if it was
Right,
like they
yeah.
were looking for something. So like you're not just coming in going, I learned it exactly, and I don't have any clue anything other than that. You know, like learn the music, and if you don't love it and you don't want to do that, then you know whatever works for you, but maybe that's not really what makes you happy. You know. But,
Yeah.
man, have a good attitude, show up on time, and do your homework. You know, those three things, like, for sure. And then just never stop and ask somebody, like, I want to learn more about this. Go find it, seek it out. You know what I mean? Like, don't sit at home and do the same thing over and over again. It's what the definition of crazy, right?
Right.
You do
yeah.
the same
Einstein's
thing over and over and
definition of
expect
crazy.
different results. That's
Right.
crazy. So, but that's, like I said, cliche almost, because those are like things that you should do, that I want to do in my life.
Right. Yeah. Well,
You know, with anything, you know, so I don't know if that helps someone.
cliches are cliched for a reason.
Right. That's true. That's why we got a word for it.
But I think that's great advice.
I do too. Yeah. So
Most successful musicians I've known have followed that advice.
yeah, absolutely. Most successful people I've known have followed that advice.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So how can we find out more about your music and what you're doing, for the sake of our listeners who may want to do that?
Right. Well, you can Google me and make sure you put keyboard, because there's several Matt Slocums out there.
There's a law firm. I know
There's
there's.
the guy. He spells his with a B at the end. But as far as my exact spelling, there's several. You know, great guitar player, great celloist. There's a great drummer. There's even a photographer. But you know, you can Google me, obviously, Matt Slocum keyboards, and YouTube and that thing. I do have Facebook. It's my full name, Matthew Dutot Slocum. Matthew, pretty obvious. Dutot, Dutot, and Slocum, Slocum.
Very cool.
All right.
So we covered website, social media, covered the bands you work with.
Yeah. And we'll put those links on the website.
We'll put the links up
We'll-
on the
We'll link
website.
to your Facebook
Yeah.
on
Okay.
our
Cool.
website too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm always hate to just push the stop button because I always
I
think
know
it's
you're like,
something
it's
great.
got to be something else.
Yeah.
It's like,
We can always bring it back.
yeah, we
Yeah.
could do it, you know, later on. When you
Edits.
guys, but no, that was great, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming, man. This has been really awesome,
Yeah.
and I think that our listeners will gain a lot.
I hope so. I hope they gain something.
Yeah.
Do you wanna close us out?
Yeah, I think I'm going to play you guys something that Matt recorded with us back in 2000.
Wow.
Uh oh.
And you were just as fantastic back
Oh
then.
man.
This is my band Tonal Vision. This is the song called Odd Times. The entire song is based on odd time signatures, but at the very end, we had Matt join in. We're in 7/4.
Okay.
Matt comes in and you just have to hear it.
I guess so. Yeah.
Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you again soon.
And there you have it. The first of many discussions on instruments with the artists that use them. To learn more about today's guest, find this episode, number 17, on our website, musicstudent101.com. Send questions and comments to info@musicstudent101.com.